Welcome to Free to Disagree's Communal Sense podcast. My name is Amanda MacDonald. This is Larry Young. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the Trump impeachment. But before we get started, make sure that you go over to our Facebook and like our page. And you also go over to our YouTube and like and subscribe at Free to Disagree, Amanda MacDonald. So, Larry, we wanted to talk a little bit about the Trump impeachment this week, but I think that it would be beneficial first to go into a little bit of background about the whole issue with Ukraine, how it came about, and kind of where it stands now before we go into all of the impeachment stuff.
Yes, I certainly agree. As regards to the beginning of this matter, of course, the summer of this year is when the primary details associated with the impeachment inquiry emerged. I believe it was July 26th was when the conversation between Trump and Zelensky took place.
The 25th, yeah.
The 25th.
Mm-hmm.
I was close.
Yeah.
And it was the conversation which, of course, brought about everything that happened. But ahead of the conversation with Trump and Zelensky, there were a series of texts that were exchanged among the ambassador to Ukraine, who recently resigned, Kurt Volker, as well as Trump's aides, various aides of Trump, relating to Giuliani's attempts to try to pressure the Ukrainian government into investigating the Bidens.
Right. Yeah, those text messages were pretty revealing. I pulled up the article that has kind of all of it there, and the messages that Democrats seem to be focusing on primarily are, well, the biggest one, I would say, is the one from, what is that, September 9th, from Gordon Sondland. And he says, Bill, I believe that you're incorrect about President Trump's intentions. The president has been crystal clear, no quid pro quos of any kind. The president is trying to evaluate whether Ukraine is truly going to adopt the transparency and reforms that President Zelensky promised during his campaign. I suggest we stop the back and forth by text. If you still have concerns, I recommend that you give Lisa Kenna, or S, a call to discuss them directly. Thanks. And so it seems that that the ambassadors to Ukraine, the aide to President Zelensky, all of these people were having back and forth text messages about kind of the setup of a meeting for President Zelensky to come to the United States, to come to the White House and have a meeting with President Trump, as that would give him a certain amount of credibility in Ukraine for his new regime.
Certainly, because of course, over the past 5 years, Ukraine has had to deal with the situation with Russia having seized the Crimea back in 2014.
Right.
Difficulties with the separatists who have been supported by Russia.
Right.
And in order to do that, they've been dependent upon the military aid, which has been furnished by NATO, but especially by the United States. And the implication that seems to derive, you could say, from these text messages is that Volker and Sandlin and the other associates of Trump, aides of Trump.
Yeah, from the State Department.
Yes, that they were engaged in an effort to pressure the Ukrainian president and his government into taking these steps before they could have that meeting with Trump.
Right.
In the sense of, again, saying, well, you have to put out a statement concerning your investigations into Burisma, which is the company Hunter Biden was involved with. You have to put out a statement concerning your efforts to fight corruption.
Right.
And not only do you have to put out the statements addressing those specific things, we also want to look at the statements before you put them out.
To make sure it says the correct thing, essentially.
And the Democrats, of course, have been arguing the concept of the implicit pro quo. Of course, not so much an explicit quid pro quo in the sense of Trump's chat with Zelensky, his talk with Zelensky, but the context of everything else that has transpired with these attempts to influence Zelensky and to force this statement, to force this investigation, contingent not only upon the aid, but also upon being able just to meet with Trump or even talk to Trump, because they were also insisting, we must see this statement. You must put this statement out before any of those things can happen.
Right. President Trump or at least his aides, made it clear that they wanted Zelensky to essentially convince Trump that they were going to look into the corruption schema that happened in the 2016 election and Burisma. And it seemed like those were maybe two separate issues to the president, but it just so happens that they're linked pretty well when Joe Biden is your front runner for the Democratic Party. And as it turns out, since all of this news has come to the fore, Biden is losing a lot of his support base, and it seems like Elizabeth Warren is kind of taking off in the polls as a response.
Well, Biden, of course, has been harmed by his gaffes, by concerns over his age, and Warren has run a very effective campaign thus far. But it is clear from the polls that his standing has deteriorated further because one of the main arguments, and I've seen other people say this, one of the main arguments about Biden was that he had the greatest electability out of all the candidates.
Right.
That he would
to
be
beat
more
Trump.
That he would be more capable than Warren or Sanders of facing Trump and defeating him. However, this controversy has eroded his approval ratings and has given increased doubts to his ability to do so. And it also, more recent polls have shown Elizabeth Warren doing better in a hypothetical matchup against Trump than she had been previously. And given what has happened with that, and given also the fact, I like to say, of polarization, of people coalescing behind one party or another just to get the other party out, I think it's becoming clear at this point that Biden would not give the Democrats that much more of an advantage than what Warren or Sanders or even Harris might be able to give them.
Right. And so the Democrats have now, since the transcript came out about the phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky, they've initiated what Nancy Pelosi is calling an official impeachment inquiry. But I wanted to talk about that a little bit because it actually isn't an official impeachment inquiry, regardless of the strong language that she uses to suggest otherwise. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the impeachment process and what it's supposed to look like as opposed to what it's looking like now, and what those implications are moving forward for Trump, especially in the 2020 election, a little bit with you. So kind of to get the ball rolling a little bit, can you kind of tease out what that distinction is between Nancy Pelosi's language and what an actual official impeachment inquiry would look like?
The distinction between what Pelosi has done, and I've seen this argument that the reason why Pelosi hasn't launched it or hasn't done it in the official manner is because she's trying to protect vulnerable Democrats who are up for re-election next year.
Right.
Many of the Democrats in these districts that flipped last year, some of these districts were very heavily supportive of Trump. And if they were forced to go on the record and vote for an actual impeachment inquiry, just the inquiry by itself, to say nothing of actual impeachment, that would hurt their chances. So the distinction between what is happening now and between an official inquiry, first of all, the matter has been handed off to the House Intelligence Committee, which is not the proper committee that it's supposed to go to. Traditionally, it's been the House Judiciary Committee that has taken the charge over drafting articles of impeachment and over the inquiry process. And so the fact that the Intelligence Committee is taking the lead, it gives it more of that sort of being more of an unofficial process, less than it should be.
Because it's not at all kind of going to what precedent has set for us.
Yes. But even though, of course, that's not a constitutional requirement that it has to be through judiciary. But
the Constitution does not specify that.
That's what has been done through more recent processes. And so the other distinction, again, of course, is the fact that there hasn't been an actual vote held. It was just an announcement. It was basically, over the past couple of years, many Democrats, of course, have come onto the train, some for impeaching Trump directly. There was a vote by Al Green of Texas. He forced the vote several months ago over actual impeachment charges. And that, of course, did not go forward. And what is happening now is Pelosi made an official announcement saying we're launching an inquiry into Trump, but it's basically just a continuation of the investigations that these committees have done into the Trump administration over the past couple of years. So it's a continuation of what we've seen from Mueller. Now they're just saying, oh, this is just an impeachment inquiry. They're putting an official title over it, even though it's not anything more. And not only to move past that, to actually have a vote to open the inquiry, you would also have to have the process through the Judiciary Committee, subpoenas, which they have done that, but subpoenas, witnesses, drafting articles of impeachment, voting upon those articles, and then sending them out to the full House. The full House would vote upon those articles, which would be a simple majority. Then they would have to be sent over to the Senate, which would hold a trial on the articles that the House passes, a trial presided over by the Chief Justice. And such a trial would require for at least 2/3 of the senators, 67 out of 100, to convict the president. Only once that's done is when an actual removal from office would take place.
Right. So there's a difference between an impeachment and a removal from office. But staying in the House for just a second, if the Judiciary Committee isn't the committee that is hearing or issuing subpoenas and hearing testimony from witnesses and such, if it's the Intelligence Committee that's doing that, does it have any real binding legitimacy concerned in the whole process?
Again, there's no constitutional requirement that says a specific committee has to instigate these proceedings.
Right.
So it is just left up just to the House and Senate as a whole. It doesn't say this specific committee must take up these charges and this specific committee must refer. It doesn't say that. It just refers to the two houses of Congress as a whole. So theoretically, the Intelligence Committee could propose articles of impeachment and they could be sent out. Now, while I think that that would be a runaround, and I don't think it would be what you could say there would be doubts about its legitimacy in the sense of unprecedented move, it would be within Congress's ability to do so.
And to make sure that it's a little bit more clear for our viewers then, so whether it's the Intelligence Committee or the Judiciary Committee, one of those two committees at this point would have to be charged with voting on articles of impeachment. But that committee voting on articles of impeachment doesn't necessitate actual impeachment. Actual impeachment wouldn't occur until charges have been filed, until the committee, whichever one, votes on it, and then it also goes to the full House for another vote.
Yes.
So none of those things have happened yet, to my knowledge. And so to me, an official impeachment inquiry, that language that Nancy Pelosi uses, it seems to kind of like placate the whole process and necessitate kind of like a media mob that makes it look like President Trump's going to be impeached, like right here, right now. And it doesn't seem to me that that's actually the case. Like it's going to be a much longer process than that.
Yes.
And so if we're coming up on the election, actually, let me back up. So before we even talk about the election, let's say that the House goes ahead and they draft some articles of impeachment. What kind of charges do you think Trump would end up getting? Because all I've heard them say so far is obstruction of justice, and that and Adam Schiff came out and said, you know, if Trump doesn't respond to any of these subpoenas or if none of these witnesses come and testify, we're going to consider that further obstruction of justice. Are there any other charges that you've heard of that are kind of floating in the air right now about what Trump's facing?
I have not heard of anything else besides that. Potentially, again, thing about impeachment is that the Constitution says the president shall be impeached for and convicted of high crimes and misdemeanors. So treason, bribery, high crimes and misdemeanors. Now, treason, as defined in the Constitution, consists of levying war against the United States or giving aid and comfort to our enemies, to American enemies. That's a very limited definition. And this matter obviously does not fall within that definition. Bribery, of course, you know, either being bribed by or attempting to bribe someone else. Theoretically, the House could claim, well, Trump was trying to, you know.
Yeah, by withholding aid. That was their kind of way of bribing, essentially.
That could be their definition. Again, of course, bribery has a more specific definition.
Right.
But again, the House of Representatives, there's been a view that has been adopted that the House that an impeachable offense is whatever Congress says that it is. At any time, any place, they can impeach any federal officials for whatever reason they believe sufficient. So they may not even need a particular crime to go upon. Now, the other category, high crimes and misdemeanors, again, they could claim, well, the president obstructing justice is a high crime.
Right, because he's supposed to be the one officiating justice.
Well, not officiating justice, but he's supposed to be responsible for ensuring that the laws are faithfully executed.
Executed, right.
And
that's
if
what
he's
I was
doing so in a way that is not conducive to that, then they can say, well, he's committed an impeachable offense. Right. And that seems to be the direction that the Democrats are going upon. Now, I don't know how fruitful that direction will be.
Right.
Because to get through, now for the House, they only need a simple majority, 218. Mm-hmm. And as things stand now, they have that because more than 218 Democrats have come out in favor of the inquiry.
Right.
And I bet you if it came to a vote, those same number who've come out will vote for impeachment.
Right.
But getting to the Senate, though, they would need to get at least 18 or 19 Republicans to hit the 67 number because there's only 48 Democrats.
Right.
And, of course, there's some doubts over some of those Democrats. People like Sinema, Joe Manchin, the more moderate members of the Democratic caucus, you have to make sure that they're in line with impeachment. And then once you get them in line, you have to convince 19 Republicans. The only Republicans at this point who I could see conceivably supporting impeachment are Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Mitt Romney, and Ben Sasse.
Yep.
So that's 4. A fifth one may be someone like Rob Portman, possibly. But
it's a long shot.
Or Lamar Alexander, possibly. But again, to be able to get the 19 Republicans, you would have to have a case that is beyond reproach. It would have to be a case akin to Watergate. You know, Nixon was brought down because there were tapes explicitly showing that he had ordered the cover-up and was involved in the cover-up. Whereas we haven't seen any direct evidence of that nature with this impeachment process yet. If we were to get, even though potentially not, but if we were to somehow get a tape, not even just a tape, an email, a letter, a text message, some sort of documentation that shows Trump directly ordering efforts to coerce Ukraine in order to be able to get the meeting, to be able to get the aid, right. Coerce Ukraine into investigating Biden. If we were to get something that explicit and also in conjunction with Trump not cooperating with the investigation, those two elements together might be enough to convince enough Republicans to turn on him. Mm-hmm. But it would also depend upon the opinion of the American populace because right. Trump's supporters are firmly in his corner no matter what happens. But his supporters are a minority. The majority of the population, the Democratic base, and independents. If independents become strongly on board with this and polls show a clear majority of Americans, a strong majority of Americans, probably on the order of 60 to 70%, think that Trump should be impeached, then that would give them more grounds to do so. Yeah,
I was I just saw some recent polls over this last week, too, that independents are getting more and more on board as time progresses with the impeachment process to say, hey, we want to impeach Trump. But the number is still only at like 48% or something like that. It's not a high enough majority for people to
that's basically
to do it.
Trump's base. Because mind you, Hillary Clinton got 48% of the vote
right
last time around, and Trump got 46%. So the numbers that we're seeing thus far, basically, the people who voted for Clinton support impeachment. The people who voted for Trump are against it. That's what we're seeing up to this point.
So it's basically going to be the independents that are ultimately going to decide what happens with this. But, okay, so say that articles of impeachment are filed. You would then call Trump an impeached president. But if he is not tried and convicted by the Senate, he will still be a sitting president.
He would be. Now, potentially that could damage him going into the 2020 election, which is also part of the reason why I don't understand why they're pursuing this now, because the election is a little over a year away. The election has already started.
Right. They already have people campaigning. If they would just focus on Elizabeth Warren maybe or one of the other top two candidates, then the potential for winning against Trump would be a lot higher.
The top two candidates, Biden, ironically enough.
Oh, right, because Bernie is basically done now after his heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Harris is done for at this point.
Right.
So the nominee will probably be either Biden or Warren. I'm pretty confident of that at this point.
Yeah. I think it'll be Warren probably. She's doing a lot better, especially with all this stuff that's just kind of hurting Biden's reputation. Sure. So he would still be a sitting president then. So for argument's sake, he could still be elected in 2020
Yes.
as a president previously impeached.
Yes, he could be.
Yeah.
As long as he's not removed from office, he could be.
Okay.
So.
Was there anything else in particular that you really wanted to talk about as far as that was concerned?
I think we covered all the basics for now. As we know, the investigation is ongoing. Of course, Giuliani, 2 of his associates were arrested recently. They were accused of illegally funneling campaign contributions from an unknown Russian source into various political campaigns, including Trump's.
Right.
And, of course, Giuliani himself has come under scrutiny for his efforts to force through this investigation. He's mentioned numerous times in the text messages. And so we'll have to see what happens with this. The process is just beginning, or has been underway for about a month now, but it's continuing forward, and we'll have to see the effects.
Okay, so because of the way that this is all panning out, the way that I'm seeing social media kind of coalesce around this issue is Democrats are pointing out places in which Trump and his direct family, Ivanka Trump, and the rest of them, Donald Trump Jr., are all or have at some point gotten some kind of money from a foreign government on some deal that they've made. And it seems to me that Democrats have been conflating the two issues. So, for example, if you work for the government and you make a deal that allows you make a deal with a foreign government that allows for you to make money personally, is that different or the same than Joe Biden having his son directly working for a foreign government and also being paid to do so without any experience whatsoever? Like, do you think that really even is a conflation, or do you think that they're basically the same thing? Because in my estimation, I want an investigation into the Biden-Hunter Biden issue myself, only because if we're going to say that we're going to root out corruption and we're going to investigate Donald Trump for corruption, then I would like to investigate whether or not any additional corruption occurred with the Biden situation, which has nothing to do. The only reason I heard about it is because of the call with Ukraine, obviously. But if I had heard about it prior, I would still say, I think that's kind of weird. We should probably investigate that.
Yes.
So do you think that these are the same thing? Do you think they're different?
Well, we've been hearing the emoluments clause. Trump has been accused of violating that since he became president. And accusations, of course, of his family being involved in government to an unfair extent, his family profiting off of their positions. I still think that there's a distinction because, again, they were, at least Ivanka Trump's company in particular, makes business deals overseas.
Right, like being an international business owner doesn't mean that you're necessarily corrupt just because of a position your dad happens to hold.
Correct. But at the same time, I don't think it's still a close distinction. It's still not, you can still conceivably make, and people have made the argument that even if that sort of, you have people who are in your administration who are involved in these kinds of deals, it can still be an avenue to corruption. Because you could still have, let's say, you're getting into a business deal in Slovenia somewhere. I don't know if it's where Melania Trump is from, Slovenia. So let's say Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner have a contract with some company over in Slovenia, and then it comes out that that company was giving political contributions to their father. That would be a problem.
Right.
But the thing with Hunter Biden is the fact that he was directly being paid directly by this company, supposedly for being on their board of directors and not doing anything of substance, having very little knowledge about the country's culture, no knowledge of its language, very little knowledge of its economy, no expertise in that field, and having that. Now, of course, a lot of people say, well, you focus on the Biden, that's the conspiracy theory. Bidens did nothing wrong. The Bidens are blameless, angelic people who have contributed to this country and who ought not to be questioned. A lot of people are saying that. The Bidens are blameless. It is Trump and his family who are the real corrupt ones, and we need to go after them, and we need to take them with all we got.
Right.
And then we have other people saying that Biden's corrupt, and that we need to go after Biden and the whole, Ukraine business is a hoax, and we should not even bother with it, and Trump is the greatest president we've ever had. You got people saying these sorts of things.
Yeah.
So overall, even though there's a distinction between them, it's lost in the discourse.
Yeah, I feel like the loss of that distinction is actually going to create like a slippery slope in the discourse about what we consider corruption and what we don't consider corruption, which is why I would like both of them to be investigated. If we're going to do an official impeachment inquiry on Trump, that's fine. I have no problem with that. Let's make sure that we're collecting some hard evidence and that whatever evidence we do find is admissible in court and is something that we can actually use to impeach him if, in fact, he's done anything wrong. But at the same token, I feel like if we don't properly address the Biden issue, that will embolden Republicans moving into 2020 to say, look, these Democrats are hypocrites. They have complete proof of direct corruption over here in Ukraine, and they did absolutely nothing with Hillary and now with Joe Biden. Yeah. So how can we trust them to move forward into 2020 as a presidential candidate or whatever, like Elizabeth Warren or Joe Biden himself? So I think that's kind of poisonous in the discourse, and that's why I wanted to bring it up and get your take on it a little bit. Because to me it seems like if you have no real credibility in the field that you're working in, or if you have no real knowledge of the language or of the culture, how can you get on a board without being corrupt?
That's true.
How is that possible? And add to that, I posed this question in a Facebook thread recently, and I got attacked by a bunch of leftists, one of which provided me 4 sources. I think it was like Fox News, NPR, a CNN resource, and something else. I forget what the other one is. And he said, look, in all of these articles, the Bidens were innocent, right? And in the first 4 paragraphs of the article, it says, under the previous political regime, which was known for corruption, and known for paying off prosecutors to shut down cases or for firing prosecutors who didn't shut down cases, that this other regime had investigated the Bidens twice and they found nothing. So therefore Biden is innocent. And I was like, well, this is the corrupt regime you're talking about, and the prosecutors that are being referred to in the article were either paid off or fired. So I think it actually proves that maybe there was at least a hint of corruption that was going on there. How involved Joe Biden was, we have yet to know. But I think it would be irresponsible for us as the American electorate not to demand an investigation of both.
Right.
Because I feel like
I certainly agree. It definitely has robbed Biden of his electability argument.
Yeah.
He's not. I remember that poll that showed Biden leading by 16 points a few months ago.
Yeah.
Outrageous margin. 16. Nobody is going to win by 16 points in this polarized of an environment.
Right. That's basically a landslide election.
That is a landslide. And we have not seen that in over 30 years. So now I think it's likely that he could lose.
Yeah.
I think he could lose to Trump. So,
especially if we don't investigate the Bidens as well. I mean, if Joe Biden has nothing to hide, investigating him shouldn't be that much of a problem. Right. In the same way that if Trump has nothing to hide, investigating him shouldn't be much of a problem. Right? So, yeah, that's kind of how I've been feeling about it.
All right, then.
But thank you for coming by. I appreciate it, as always. It was awesome talking to you. And for all you guys out there, again, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. It's Free to Disagree, Amanda MacDonald, and like our Facebook. Have a good night.